This is something that I think a lot of people have known is coming for quite some time. Danielle Smith's been talking about the idea of an Alberta pension plan for long before she was leader of the United Conservatives. I suspect you weren't surprised by it. So is this something that you've been musing about, thinking about for a few years now?
It's not a new idea even to the current government. Back in the 1960s, for example, when members of parliament were debating the original Canada Pension Plan Act, but most recently, it has been an issue that was both kind of campaigned on in a sense. You know, the Fair Deal panel was something that was put forward by the former premier. That panel was very clear that the government should pursue a separate Alberta pension plan. I'm not at all surprised we're actually moving forward with this conversation.
I guess I'm asking you about the pros and the cons.
Like with any big complex policy area, there's always pros and cons. Demographics are not fixed, and today is slightly older. There is risks of a separate plan. The CPP pools all of that nationally, and so any province that goes it alone has to manage those, in this case, demographic risks on their own. And the CPP, when it was set up, was not set up as a fully funded pension plan. It was, for the most part, what's called a pay-as-you-go system, where contributions of current workers fund benefits of retirees. And for those initial waves of elderly individuals who received CPP benefits, decades ago, it was a really good deal for them because they didn't contribute for most of their working years, but collected full benefits once the plan was fully phased in. So there was definitely redistribution from young to old. Less so today, but it's still not fully funded. So there is that, that workers paying in, young people paying in, collecting benefits later on. And there is that sort of redistribution happening within the plan. Alberta, being a young province, therefore just has more young people who are contributing into the plan. And so mechanically, there is this large gap between contributions made by Alberta workers and benefits received by Alberta retirees.
This report from, I think it's LifeMark, which has since been this consultancy since acquired by TELUS Health, that prepared this report that's been presented. The report asserting that Alberta would be entitled to 53% of the Canada Pension Plan assets were it to leave.
It is a problematic interpretation of the Canada Pension Plan Act. And so in fairness to LifeMarks, or in fairness to anyone who tries to come up with what a separate Alberta plan would look like, is the language in the federal act, the Canada Pension Plan Act, that governs how much assets a separating province would receive is unclear. It's imprecise. Think of it as this 4-step process. Step 1, add up all the contributions that have been made by workers in the province. Okay, that's conceptually easy. Step 2 is take the part of the Canada Pension Plan investment returns that are derived from those contributions. Now that sounds easy, but what does derived mean in this context is not clear because there are multiple potential ways of interpreting that language.
Let's say 50% plus one or whatever it takes, go, yeah, let's do it. Danielle Smith just lets the federal finance minister know, and then they strike us a check, and then the next thing you know, we're paving the streets with gold. Is it that easy?
Well, you're right to note that 25% is an enormous amount of assets. By the middle of this decade, they'd be equivalent to about $150 billion. So it's a lot. And if we were to start up a separate plan with that amount of initial assets, then my estimates are that the contribution rates we'd need to pay are about 7.8%, which is about 1.7% below what that minimum rate is for the Canada Pension Plan. And that's non-trivial savings, about $540 or so per worker, and then that again for employers. So there are some real benefits here for an Alberta pension plan, but ideally we wouldn't be using that money to pave infrastructure with gold. We would use that money and invest it in order to generate future returns to pay for retirement benefits. Best case scenario is that these funds would be kept with a professional management group, potentially even the CPP itself, not used for anything other than maximizing returns to pay for future retirement benefits.
What do you mean? Hang on. What do you mean keeping them with the CPP itself? That's like, Alberta's going to separate from Canada, but we still want to use Canadian passports, the military, and the RCMP. I don't think really?
Well, that's certainly an idea that the premier put forward. There's no kind of mechanical reason why it couldn't occur. We would pay the CPP in order to manage these assets. Now, of course, they'd have to agree. There'd be some interesting politics there. I think probably more than likely they would not agree. I don't know. But yeah, it's got that flavor of the Quebec separation discussion in the 90s where, oh, we'd easily get access to all the free trade agreements, no problem.
Yeah.
Use the same currency and so on. So I think there's real open questions there around how we would manage the assets. And I just think best case scenario is that it would be with an external entity disconnected to the Alberta government, completely focused entirely on maximizing returns.